injured, so I can't wait to take you down without any excuses. I'm all kinds of amped up right now.
Are you?
A little bit.
Oop, here we go. We're live, just so you know. Don't say anything terrible about
Somebody sponsored by this.
Nice.
I did not pick mine up.
Santiago went and got his Natter Days. I have my Bush as promised.
I'm a super trader. My beer's from Chicago, so
Oh
Hmm.
Yeah.
my
Gosh.
bad. My bad, guys.
Oh boy. Wonder who the fire is sponsored by. Goose Island? That'd be too tasty.
Goose Island is still an AB company.
I was gonna say who now
that's
is
right.
my AB.
I forgot that.
You'll get a
That's the
312
best part.
at the brew house.
That's right.
It's so funny. Easy show tonight. We'll probably find a way to go, over an hour somehow still.
Right.
I mean, we ended up doing that with what, 1 or 2 games by itself. A little bit more than that to talk about tonight, right?
Yeah. I didn't even look at. I forgot we were going over Real Monarchs tonight too.
I was gonna ask based on that title. I was like, oh damn, are we not talking about Monarchs? Because that was the more fun game to talk about.
Yeah.
To be honest.
No kidding. I need to look at those stats anyway. Boy, I looked at the stats for the Whitecaps game. And yeah, I didn't expect it. Didn't expect to find what I saw.
I'm interested in which part you're talking about.
Well, we'll see if someone else beats me to it. It's my policy to kind of ask you guys questions before I go talking. It's been a good policy.
I don't really have any like eye-catching stats.
No, it's
Okay,
nothing.
I was looking. I don't see any like eye catching. Well, maybe all those shots that St. Louis took, but
Possession, maybe.
Yeah, it's
We'll
the
see.
possession. I mean, it was the same for Monarchs, so no excuses, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. So I had that exact thought of
Yeah.
how odd it is compared to what we had been playing as.
Yeah. I'll save it for later, but yeah. Lutz even said it. He mentioned it too, and it was the first thing I thought about when he said it in that interview, where he was like, "Of course, if they want to give us the ball, we want to play good soccer." So, yeah.
I mean, if they're gonna let us possess it, why not possess it?
I think that may end up being the plan for everyone in MLS Next Pro. We may have the ball. Ooh, I was tired, but every time I have a beer and start talking to you guys, I get energized. Good to go.
I didn't know if I'd make it. I had a 7 o'clock 6 o'clock. What time is it? Church thing, and it ended abruptly in a good way. But it was like all of a sudden it was just over. I was like, oh my god, I've got 10 minutes to book it home.
You told them you had to record a post.
Yeah, I said, guys, sorry, I've got a soccer podcast.
Jesus will wait. You're good.
Can we put a pin in Jesus for a minute and go? No.
I think we should just go ahead and start without Stuart, if that's okay with you guys. I don't want to go
That's
too
fine.
late.
I was just realizing I wrote way too many notes on Lutz's interview. Too many.
Perfect. That'll be good though.
What's going to be quicker, us talking about it, going through your notes, or just like dropping that whole podcast in this one?
The latter.
All right, here we go. I'm going to hit record now. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. We got a fun show for you tonight. We don't have a ton to talk about, but I think we'll always pretty much find a way to fill an hour or so. But first, before we do that, let's introduce the guests for today, or the co-hosts. Jake, how's it going, man? It's been a minute.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know why you're saying we don't have a ton to talk about. There's 2 games. There's a potential announcement tomorrow. Just got a cool City Voice podcast. So I don't know. Seems like there's a lot to talk about to me. But I'm doing pretty good. I have to give you guys some props. Ooh, Stu's jumping on.
There is a stew.
I have to give you guys major props because Matt, I know you've talked a lot before where you've come on and done a podcast when you're like solo parenting. You're the only one. And Claire, my wife, is gone this entire week, and I only have a dog, and I'm like struggling to get by. I tried to make dinner tonight, and my water didn't boil quick enough. So I just ate like a piece of bread right before we jumped on.
No.
So I'm struggling on my own.
Is it because is Margot becoming a diva? Is she hard to deal with now because she's such a star?
No, she's fine. I mean, I had to take her on a walk, which I always take her on walks, but I am terrible at cooking. Like the kitchen stresses me out. So I'm very fortunate to have a very awesome, nice wife who makes meals, and I am just hopeless there. So
I could definitely commiserate with that, but don't sell yourself short. I mean, my kids might need attention or putting to bed a little more, but they don't require walks, so I don't have to deal with that.
That's true. Yeah. You just throw them out.
but I require food. So yeah, but
there's some benefits.
I'm all right.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad you're here tonight too. Santiago, how are you doing? Rocking the Ravioli Boys t-shirt. I love it.
Yeah, doing great. Finally had a chance to pick it up. When they announced they were ready, I was about to leave town, and then I kind of forgot about it for a few days when I came back. And this week I remember, I have to go get it. I was running some errands around the Galleria, so I went and get it, and they still had it. I was like, maybe since it's been so long, they no longer have it. But I was surprised that they still had quite a few that people had not picked up.
Oh, for real? So I thought we could only buy it that one day, but are they still?
No. That's true. You could only buy it that day, but they had a whole shelf with T-shirts people had not come to pick up yet.
So I should just come up and just like say names until the right one pops up.
Yeah, I should have looked at some of the names and hook you up.
That's what needed to happen. As you can tell, I regret not buying one. I almost did, and I decided not to at the last second. Terrible choice.
All those people still think it was a joke.
Right.
They should go pick up their shirt. So
they're like, yeah, good. I made a donation, but yeah, it's real. It's here.
See, nobody realizes that that's the team that bridged the gap between MLS for the Lou and St. Louis City. We were Ravioli Boys for a period of time.
Right.
I just love they embraced it. Yeah, and the shirt looks cool. I wish I'd bought it. Matt, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Phil. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about what should be a pretty fun day tomorrow, as it turns out, or today if the pod's released on a Thursday, or maybe yesterday. I don't know when you're listening to this, but yeah, I'm excited for City stuff. I'm excited for a North London derby that Jake and I are going to butt a little heads on.
So on our walk, I do have a neighbor who's a Arsenal fan, and we've never met, but I've seen him in an Arsenal jersey. So I was thinking, it's like, maybe Margo just wants to leave something a little extra on his porch tomorrow morning. Well.
Dirty. That's inappropriate.
Flaming bag. I hope it's a flaming bag. Stuart, how you doing? I'm glad you made it, man.
I'm doing well. Just had to haul a bunch of IKEA stuff up in the house, so I was a few minutes late. And apparently the camera's not working tonight, so
it's okay. I pay you for the free advertising every time you put the flyover footy on there. So
I said it last time. It's me. It has to be me because I've never seen Stu's face on when we do the video, when we do the live stream.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Jake. Appreciate that. As Matt alluded to just a minute ago, something big is brewing in St. Louis, is what the tweet said. And there was a little tiny clip of a scarf, and that could be an S, that could be a C in the bottom corner over there. Brewing suggests perhaps beer, and so that's kind of the discussion we've been talking about. And the last thing I'll say is that S could be like a Bud Select S. It could be a C for City. Who knows?
Now,
but I think we're all assuming one overarching company, right? So let's talk this out. Matt, what were you thinking when you tweeted about it?
Now, City's done something similar to this before, where you get a better picture if you follow them on all of their social media accounts.
I've noticed this, yes.
So they'll release a picture on Twitter. They'll release the same or a slightly different picture on Facebook. Instagram might have like a combination, or maybe they release them all in the app. But they did the same thing today, to where I looked at Twitter first, like I always do, and I saw that C or S or whatever the little cutoff letter was on the bottom, and so I was like, okay, they're doing some kind of like offset city or St. Louis City, and the hint on this one on Twitter is the fact that it's on an animal. And it definitely clearly looks like it's a horse or a Clydesdale in this case.
Cool.
But if you look on Facebook, there's a slightly different angle to the scarf, and you could see a different script and a different letter on a different part of the scarf. And anybody with a passing knowledge of St. Louis can tell you that is the A on Anheuser-Busch.
Isn't it funny? Like, script really goes a long way. Even partial letters, you can tell what the font is. It's crazy.
I mean, when it's all about branding and marketing, they do it right, and they do it very unique, and it's very noticeable when you can see a small portion of it.
Stuart, sounds like you saw that as well, and we're thinking the same thing, huh?
Yeah, no, it's the top part of the A of Anheuser in AB. It's very striking. It can't be anything else.
They might as well have put a bow tie on it.
Yeah.
I keep meaning to like involve. Yeah, I'm not going to try to do it. I keep meaning to get pictures because I can like put a picture in front of our faces so everyone could look at it, but I just don't. I'm going to mess something up if I try it. Jake, Santiago, what do you guys think about all of this? I know we all like brought our beers, right? Matt, you brought like a whole 12 pack to share with everybody.
Yeah. I live right next to a Walgreens, and so I stopped in and I was like, what kind of fun AB product will they have? Not much. So I ended up with a nice 12 pack, which I guess I'll get some use out of because they'll be a sponsor. Maybe it'll be fun to drink at some point. I figure if I'm going to drink an AB product, I'm going to drink a decently good AB product. And so this is one of the only good tasting ones to me that they have.
Santiago has Natter Days, which I thought was a really nice move, actually.
Yeah. I was like, oh, let me see what I have in the fridge, and I found some Natter Days. I said, well,
for a hot day.
Probably nobody else will pull that one, so that's what I'm gonna drink tonight.
Appropriate, since we broke the temperature record in St. Louis today.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, nasty day. What do you think, Jake?
When I first saw the picture, I saw the fur, and I thought, just because Purina, my mind instantly went to dog, and I thought, did they get another dog? Like, we have Margot, and she's rearing to go for anything. That was genuinely my first thought. I was like, is this another dog video that Margot's missing out on? And I was kind of upset. And then I was like, that's not a dog. And then seeing the brewing, and that, because before I even read the text or anything, that was my immediate thought. I was like, they painted a dog city red, and it wasn't Margot. What the heck?
I'm telling you, Margot needs an agent. Like, she just needs to be connected to someone who knows someone in the club, and she could get all those gigs. But yeah, I guess that's a Clydesdale. Is that Clydesdale hair? Is that what we're thinking?
Seems like it. It seems like it's a horse of some kind. And so
horse.
my thought is, if it is, which that makes all the sense in the world, right? Because it's St. Louis, it's AB, and we've seen the kinds of deals that they can pull in from these sponsors, where you're talking Purina and Centene in tens of millions of dollars. And so having a high dollar sponsor makes all the sense in the world. And it is still technically local. North American headquarters is in St. Louis. So whether it's an international company or not, AB is synonymous with St. Louis. And so that's how they're going to market it. That's how they're going to sell it. It's pretty clear. It's a local partnership to them. But my question, and I think if we've seen a few of these comments so far, and we'll again know by the time the pod is released, but which beer brand are they going to use as the main sponsor? I think it's going to be Budweiser, just because they're going to go big on this one. I would like to see like a King of Beers for King Louis IX type of thing, but I think they're going to go with the main beer. Curious what you guys think, if they're going to go with like a Busch or a Mick Ultra or a Bud Light, or go crazy and go with a Natter Day or a Bud Light Platinum, a seltzer.
I think they go with Budweiser. I think it's the flagship brand. It makes sense if it's the most St. Louis recognizable brand. Like when you think St. Louis City, you think Budweiser. So to me, Clydesdales, Budweiser, that script, it all lines up. So that makes sense to me.
Yep.
But you did mention, Matt, that this is what you tweeted, that Charlotte were sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, but the beer that they, I don't know, what is it?
They chose or partnered.
Yeah, it was like Ultra.
The sponsoring beer or the title beer or something. They went with Mick Ultra. And we've seen like AB do that before plenty, where Bud Light has some signage over at Sporting Park in Kansas City, or Children's Mercy, I'm sorry. And so they've done that where AB's the partner and they use different brands and names to be the face of that partnership.
Yeah, I think Budweiser would be pretty classy. And I agree with Stuart that the script kind of suggests that. But, you know, blue collar boy over here, I'm drinking Busch. So, you know, Busch Stadium, it would just be hilarious to me if we have this blue collar high pressing team and Busch was on tap everywhere at every place you could go. I think it'd be hilarious. If I splash this enough, do you think I'll get a sponsorship? This is my goal for the night.
Might as well try.
I got another one here too. If I can splash two at the same time, does this help? Okay, just trying. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about a game. Let's talk about two games, actually. Two games have happened. I think we'll start with Real Monarchs. We'll start with the happy one, then we'll get sad, and then we'll talk about a few things at the end that will hopefully lift our spirits. 2-0 win against Real Monarchs, SLC Monarchs. For a second, I thought I got that wrong. Matt, why don't you save me for myself? Why don't you start by talking about this game and what you saw from it?
Yeah, so first thing I noticed is we went with a pretty standard lineup. We've talked a lot about whether we're going to start to get into a developmental type where we pull in some academy players with more minutes. We know Aaron Hurd's seen a few more minutes, but this lineup was Michael Creek in the back, Ezra Armstrong, Hebert, Yarrow, DeRosa in the back, Keel Watts, and AJ Palazzolo in the mid, Celio, Diaz, Kuzain, and then Doling up front. So it was a pretty A lineup as we've come to know it. And I think we did a pretty good job of controlling this game overall. The stat lines support that at the end. We've been a team historically now. I think that we can start using historically because 5, 6, 7 games have added up.
7 games.
Where we don't possess the ball a ton. We've been pretty clearly in the 30, 40, 45% range of possession. But this game, we were up in almost 60% possession, went to City 2, which was surprising for a number of reasons. That wasn't our MO. It was an away game. They had good attendance. So you figure that they're going to control the pace of play. They're going to control the ball. But then you throw in the fact that the Real Monarchs are one of, if not the worst teams in the league this year. And so I haven't looked into each one of their games, but just they're bottom of the table. So it makes sense that we were able to dominate them. And it's one of those, you beat the teams that you should beat. And that's what ended up happening. But it took a while for this to really kick in for us. We had the possession, we had the domination in the first half, but it wasn't until the second half where, and I don't have the minutes in front of me, but Josh Doling kind of took over.
77 minutes was the first goal.
He took over to the point where everything that we wanted to see just kind of exploded from Josh Doling. And as fans watching that game, which we all were, that was like one of the most exciting things. And I love the way it kind of unfolded because it unfolded in a very Josh Doling type way, very prototypical of how he's been playing, where you had a different player, Celio Pompeu, took a shot from about 6 yards out from the center. It curled right. It hit the right post, bounced off, ricocheted right close to Juan Kuzain outright, who played it very cleanly to Josh Doling, caught it in the air and just struck it into the top and buried it. And that to me was Doling being that facilitator who kind of doesn't command the ball, but he allows others to work around him. And then he's right there in front as that physical presence to, if he needs to, clean up and be that almost kind of facilitator fallback guy, where he finally got his due that we've been waiting to see for so many games.
Yeah, what did you everyone else think about this one? I thought of you, Santiago, because I think you and Matt both kind of tweeted that, you know, Tomas Gomez was in goal for this game, and you also mentioned the next game we're going to talk about having a St. Louisan involved. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, no, it was great to see Josh Doling finally scoring, and I know we're gonna talk about the other game in a few minutes. But now he has a scoring back-to-back games, so it's finally it's great to see 3 goals, 2 goals against Monarchs and 1 goal against Vancouver. So it's great to see that he's finally scoring. He has been doing the work. He had some assists and he had generated some chances. But it's great that finally happened, and I'm sure that will give him confidence, and I'm sure we will see more of him in the next few matches.
Yeah, let's talk about Doling. I found it interesting. We're about to talk about the City Voice with Lutz Pfannenstiel, and I'm going to bring it up early just because he was talking about João Klaus, and he was talking about wanting a striker, even if he scores 12 goals instead of 20 or 30. If he's putting in the work that they expect from a striker, then they're very happy with him. And I think I didn't expect Josh to score because of the way preseason went, and even the first few games. I was like, I think if he gets like 4 to 7 goals and a bunch of assists, I'm going to be happy with him this year. But he's starting to look like an out and out striker, number 9, isn't he? Stuart, what do you kind of think about this game?
Well, if we're talking about the game against the Butterflies, that's the last one that I was asleep for that one, unfortunately, because
sorry about that.
around. But
how'd you like the replay? Did you catch the replay?
Yeah, man. We need to talk about that, but
I loved watching the clips. I loved seeing Matt's tweets when I woke up. Seeing all that stuff, but yeah, no, I think I was in the UK for that one, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, you were. Sorry about that.
Can
I forgot
we talk
about
that for a second though? How awesome the announcers were for that game. I was going to
mention. Yeah,
I wanted to I'll let you talk about it, and then I just want to call their names out. Landon Southwick and Tom Hackett killed it in that match.
Yeah, coming into MLS Next Pro and hearing all the negatives about, of course they're still figuring it out, and some people are going to do it better than others, but they set the standard for how it should be done. They just shout out to Salt Lake and the program and the team for actually putting in, especially when they do have an MLS team, and still to make the effort to make it a good production. Because even we had multiple camera angles, and then the announcers were fantastic, and us St. Louis, not just us flyover, but St. Louis fans, of course, were watching it, and we were just getting so many shout outs because, well, it kind of turned into a game too. We're like, let's see, because I chimed in after Matt got his shout out, like, well, let me see if I can get him to shout out Margot, and he did 2 minutes later. But not only that in the interaction, but they did a really good job, and it was just really cool to have that experience because it felt like a big game experience where we were part of it. Obviously, we're excited about it. That was one of the comments was, oh, yeah. I mean, that was my tweet too, is saying something about St. Louis fans are chomping at the bit to get going. And yeah, and that proved it. The fact that they just kept shouting out St. Louis people watching the game, which is fantastic. And then even after the first goal, when the feed cut, the commentators started tweeting us updates too, because we asked for awesome. Like, we can't see the game. Fantastic. And then they're like tweeting us updates. And yeah, so big props to them. That was really cool. Another thing I was going to reference, the City Voice podcast you mentioned, which we're going to get into, but specifically this game, Lutz mentioned about when he was talking about traveling across the country and regions. And he said it's interesting seeing this game now and looking back and hearing those comments, because he mentioned, like, oh yeah, traveling to Salt Lake, the players are like, oh, why are we so tired? Mm-hmm. And just on that note of our style of play takes a lot of energy. And he mentioned he wants the players who will go and give it all and can physically do it for 90 minutes. And hearing those comments and looking back at this game and just to be able to grind it out on in higher altitude and come out with the win with 2 goals late in the game just is really exciting. And that's really cool to see, like hearing those comments from the podcast is really cool.
Completely agree. Yeah, Real Monarchs were they were kind of set up, the two teams kind of have been doing this for a long time, and Landon's been with the Monarchs since, I think from the beginning, and he's been doing his thing. But man, even the best announcers in like USL don't read tweets during the game very often. You know, I love that he did that. That is so cool because I don't know how many times it's never, I'm not even saying like someone like me or Matt, like just random people have such cool things to say during a game, or, you know, especially if you don't know enough about the team or the opposing team, which Landon did. He knew a lot of stuff, but a lot of those announcers in USL have no idea about the other team. It'd be nice if they would read some tweets once in a while and be like, yeah, this just came in from what's his name to say
And
that this is a fun fact about the team.
And that's a really good. So one of the tweets that I sent was to that exact point, and I thought the fact that he read it, not just because it was from me, but the content of it being Sergio Rivas had. He's a midfielder, and last week he played, or the week before he played as a left back, and at Real Monarchs he played at a right back, or vice versa. But the fact that he came into the game playing a different position than he had been used to, I think that to a neutral fan who's just viewing that adds a lot to know that St. Louis is trying different things, or they're putting players in different positions than they're used to. I think if you're interested in the players and the formations and everything, and you're just coming into this as a Monarchs fan or as a St. Louis fan who maybe you're just following it casually, that kind of content adds to it. And the fact that they're willing to bring in different opinions from others who know that, I think that just enhances their own broadcast.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to see more of that. Even as high as MLS, I think it'd be really cool to read that kind of thing from time to time.
Well, you know what's funny? Taylor Twellman does that too. He'll respond to tweets while he's on air. and you know what? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to do, and he won't read it on air, but he'll respond to tweets on Twitter while he's broadcasting. And I think it just adds to the engagement that he has with fans. So there's nothing like unprofessional about that concept. that you can't interact with fans, or you can't bring what they're doing into the game or take the game to the fans while you're broadcasting. I thought that was really cool the way they did it.
Also shows how good at their jobs they are. I'd be so scared to text while I was trying to pay attention to a game.
Right.
Or tweet.
Yeah, like imagine missing like a goal or an important part of the game just because you are tweeting.
Yeah. I've gotten some from Devin Kerr and during games where I'm like, hey man, great job today. And I just expect him to respond the next morning. And like 5 seconds later, he's like, thanks. But he doesn't have to pay attention as much. He's got Mike Watts doing all the hard work, right?
Right.
Which is what you do, right? Santiago, you do the play-by-play. So
the play-by-play. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it.
All right. Well, let's talk about the next game. It's not as happy an ending, but you know, so it was a 2-1 loss to St. Louis City 2 to Whitecaps FC 2. But we were looking at the stats and we were talking about it before the game. Not terribly unlike Real Monarchs, but different result, right? Who wants to lead? Jake, do you want to lead off on this one? Did you watch the game?
I caught about half of it.
Yeah. And, before you go, actually, too, because I want to complain about this. I caught the first bit, and then I'm a musician. So Friday and Saturday nights, I don't have a choice. I got to go do these things sometimes. And I've always watched the game first thing the next morning. We can't do that with MLS Next Pro. It's driving me freaking crazy.
Yeah, it sucks.
I would have totally been ready for this show. I would have watched it and been prepared. And all I got is stats for you guys. So that's like disappointing to me personally. But sorry, go ahead, Jake. What'd you feel about the game and the parts that you saw?
So I guess not this game specifically, but I was gonna ask you guys' take in opinions, looking at other teams specifically. Well, this game is gonna be a bad example because we lost, but seeing these other MLS Next Pro teams, I was gonna ask you guys do you feel St. Louis City has more of a slight advantage, like depending on like the players we brought in compared to our other teams playing more academy players? Because it's something I've noticed a lot in. Like if the commentators are mentioning like just all the young players, and of course we're playing young players too, but we got guys coming in who are straight away, or some of them hopefully gonna play pro MLS next season. Like, do we kind of have an older crop of players or a little slightly more experienced players than some of these other teams? And does that give us a slight advantage? Obviously, I think since this is the focus, this is kind of the first team at the moment. Are we a little more driven? Like, does that give us a little more advantage? I was wondering your guys' thoughts on that, because I think it was more Monarchs. I noticed they had a lot of young guys, and I noticed them talking about the young guys a lot. It was like, are we playing slightly at a higher level based on the guys that we signed for this?
So I think you will see a mix. Depends on the team we play against. Obviously, as you mentioned, the Monarchs, they had a younger lineup. But for example, Minnesota, Tacoma, they brought some of the guys from their first team roster, and yeah, a mix of guys from the first team roster with some younger guys. Vancouver had I think it was four of their super draft picks from this year, and a couple of guys from the senior roster. They had not had a lot of minutes, but you will always see that mix.
Yeah, and I think when I think the mix of it seems top heavy from a lot of these other clubs where you're having like 4 to 6 players from the senior roster, and then you have a lot of either academy or some of the new fresh signings. 'Cause I think most teams that did not have a 2-team only ended up signing 8 to 10 at most players for their 2 teams. So the rest of their club is comprised of either academy players on amateur contracts or first teamers that they loan down or that come down for a week or two. And when I look at a lot of the rosters, Tacoma had one, Minnesota had one, I think Vancouver had another, where there's a couple players who you'll find are either, in Minnesota's case, a designated player who didn't play against us, thankfully. But
Right.
those, if you look at MLS rosters, there's slots that signify basically your importance to them. And there's only a couple instances where you have like main roster positions, like 1 through 20, so to speak, of the roster, and that's your senior squad. Homegrowns, league minimum players, super draft picks, all those guys could be these other roster slots, and that's where you're seeing the majority of the MLS team loanees or players coming down to play for the 2 teams is these like 25 through 29 roster slots. And so they're players who, yes, they would, if there wasn't a 2-team, be with the senior squad and more or less ride the bench. This allows them to have minutes. So they're technically senior squad members, but they wouldn't, a lot of them compete for minutes right now. And that's why this is so valuable to MLS clubs and will be for us next year. But I think, to your question, that gives us more of an advantage because the players that we brought in and are seeing a lot of minutes now, yes, there are some college kids, but there are a handful or more players who have USL championship experience, who have a lot of professional experience that they're bringing to us. And we're seeing that at the very least, like if you compare our 3 MSU guys, Sergio Rivas from WashU, the guys who are just fresh out of college, you can compare those to the super draft players in their level of experience. So that's kind of a wash. And you see guys who Ezra, Kwame, the players who are coming in, I think Ben DeRosa was with Charleston, if I remember correctly, but the players are coming in from USL championship experience. They are more the veterans on our team with Josh Yarrow, who give us that advantage that you're kind of looking at, and that juxtaposed with the fact that we haven't been playing our academy players a whole lot, and some of these other clubs might be putting their academy players in for heavier minutes. We just haven't seen that. We've seen glimpses of them. We've seen a spot start here and there, but I don't think we've seen a full 90 from any of the academy players yet.
No.
So I think we do have an advantage in the way that we're approaching the matches with the players that we've put on the field comparatively so far. And then as we transition to what we'll talk about soon, which is the MLS players coming in July, August, I think will only amplify that.
Stuart, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, just how we set up our roster was going to be always different this year compared to a lot of the other. Oh, sorry, I was muted that whole time. I am still rusty. You guys had a couple of weeks while I was on vacation. And,
are you building IKEA furniture right now?
I wish. I'm looking at some of it right now. This stuff is on back order for like 5, 6, 7 weeks at least.
That sounds right.
Since mid-March. So no, I'm yearning and churning to do that, but no, that's not what I was going for. But no, our roster was always going to be built a bit different this year. So while we have to fill that gap between the academy players and the pro team, and we're looking for diamonds in the rough. We're looking for depth players for next year. So, like Matt said, we're going to have some of those guys who are USL championship guys, and we're not really. I fully expected that we'd throw a lot more academy guys out there this year, to be honest.
Me too.
I thought we'd be seeing a lot more of like Delkus out there. Fritz would be starting more, or Lucien Young maybe in the midfield. But we have a kind of standard reserve team that they've made, and some of these guys I think are going to be around for next year too. So maybe you have a guy like Martins who won't sign an MLS contract at the end of this year, but he signs for City 2 again next year, and he seasons another year before he makes the jump in 2024, because the talent is clearly there for him and for Evas and for Josh Doling too. I mean, fantastic. So, and Eric Walker, when Eric Walker rehabilitates, I fully expect he'll be the starting keeper for City 2 next year as we sign it back up for Berkey. But I think the really fun part of this year is going to be July 1st, which Matt alluded to. I think we're going to see some really crazy stuff. So, yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm with you on that, and to kind of echo, especially a lot of what Matt was kind of leaning into. I do think we're a bit saltier than most of the MLS Next Pro teams, but like the other ones have like this weird Santiago. I think you mentioned how Real Monarchs was mostly young players, and so was kind of Tacoma Defiance mostly was too. And then Minnesota, they had a whole bunch of a few ringers kind of involved. And, it's like a weird mix of like, first of all, I have a Zeal Jackson from Minnesota United 2, who was just a stunner in that game against us. And if you go to lineups and you click on a random player, sometimes it'll tell you his roster category, which is supplemental slots 25 through 28, which is what Matt was exactly mentioning. And he's also a homegrown. So it'll give you that information sometimes of like, boy, this guy seems really good. You can click on him and find out, oh, well, he's like toward the bottom of the Minnesota United senior roster, and he's a homegrown. So that means he's got some upside, right? So that's the other thing is like, yeah, that guy's pretty young, but he's also like, they think he's going to be something special. They might be able to sell to Europe. So like, that's the other mix of the youth. Like some of them are going to be a bunch of guys with high end that have not nearly enough experience that I think we saw in Real Monarchs. And then we get guys like Azeel Jackson, where it's like, okay, this guy's going somewhere someday, probably, if he can put everything together and get some minutes. So, yeah, I think it's a weird mix in that way. But I do think we're more salty, like we're more veteran, and we're looking for older players to kind of maybe move on to the next level. So I'm really curious. I think we should talk about that another time, but I'm really curious what our team will look like next year. Like you guys were kind of talking about whether we'll keep so many veteran players or if we'll go super young, because most of these MLS Next Pro teams, even Monarchs, used to be a mix.
Right.
When they won those championship trophies for USL, they were like 1/3 old guys and then a bunch of youth. And they were like, some of those old guys were ringers. Like, I can't think of his Jack Blake was on that team that won the tournament. So my God, that guy's amazing. And he's older. He's like 24 or something like that. So I don't know. I'd love to see that. I always think that's more enjoyable. And I think it's really nice to kind of double down on some older guys, and while you're still giving lots of minutes to young people. But I think we should talk about that some more another time. Any last thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
Well, I mean, if Matt wants to get in the game more a little bit.
We didn't talk about the game. I'm so sorry.
No, we didn't really talk about it.
I threw that off. I haven't talked to you guys in so long, so that's like a lingering question. While I'm watching every game, I mean, real quick, I'll say I'm glad that MLS Next Pro is also doing a playoff, because it does give these guys something to play for. And you did see it when the Whitecaps scored that second goal. They were They were hyped. They were playing for
They
something.
were
That's I
so
think
excited.
those are my thoughts as I'm watching games. Sometimes it's like, are these teams going to truly give it their all? But that's why I like the playoffs. You saw it when Whitecaps scored, sadly. But yeah, so I haven't talked to you guys in so long. Had to ask.
was a good
Matt,
one.
you should probably give all the cool stats about this game.
No,
I
but
want to
no-
hear about the stats, Matt. Can we get real nerdy like right away?
let's go nerdy for just a couple of minutes. So like I mentioned earlier, the possession in these two games that we're talking about, very atypical for city teams. So the time of possession for this one, or the percentage possession, 52.8 to 47.2. We had the majority of possession, but that's a very slim difference. It's basically 50-50. And you saw that if you watch the game flow. So you can see, again, I'll give props to MLS Next Pro for their stat tracking on their sites. If you go back and look at the games, every single tab has some pretty sweet looking stats, and it allows you to really dig into the game, which is incredibly helpful when you're at the match. You don't always have the opportunity to pay attention to every single play, and especially from that vantage point, and you don't have a replay to go back to. So it kind of fills in the gaps a little bit. And you can see in this match, every 5 minutes is kind of like pitter patter back and forth, tick attack here. And that's how it felt in that game. It felt like it was back and forth. There wasn't a whole lot of really attacking. Like nobody had any teeth for the most part. And you can kind of see that in the possession. But the other thing that's really noticeable in these two games are the shots on goal. Going back to the Real Monarchs game, we had, what is it? We had 16 shots on goal against the Real Monarchs. They only had 4. We had 7 shots on goal. They had 1. So 16 shots to 4 shots on goal, 7-1. So we dominated the attacking in that game. And the scoreline tells that story. The play tells that story. The possession tells that story. Against Whitecaps 2, we had 18 shots and they had 7. So pretty similar, with 6 on goal for us, 3 on goal for them. And they scored 2 of theirs. So overall, it's telling me the story that we kind of anticipated this to progress into, which is we are controlling the ball. Even if we're not controlling it overall in time of possession, we're making the most and we're pushing the ball upfield. We're getting into the attacking third. We're creating chances. We need to do a better job of finishing those chances, yes. But it's also telling me that of the few chances that we're allowing, they're dangerous chances. And we're giving up some pretty key spots. And the Vancouver's first goal was a perfect example of that, where they had the ball in their end on our left side. They gave a cross over to the middle, and there were 2 attacking players that were receiving the cross. We had three men back, our 3 back line. It was DeRosa, Yarrow, and Hebert. They were back, and the ball went just over Yarrow's head. One of the attackers headed it perfectly past DeRosa so that the other attacker could finish the ball. And that's a perfect example of what we've always been worried about with this high press attacking play, is that we could get caught. And in this case, we got caught by 2 attackers with our 3 defenders. So that's the danger that we run into and that we saw right off the bat. Now, their second goal was just a straight up banger from a free kick just outside the box.
Golazo.
That was, and on the replay though, so not replay, on the highlight, because they do show highlights. On the highlight, you can see that we had a wall of sorts. So I didn't see who was on the wall, but we had a 2-man wall. We had another player who looked like he wanted to come stand next to the wall inside the box, and he backed off. So it ended up being kind of 2 and then 1. And so where there's the 2 and the 1 here, if you're looking at the video, the ball kind of sailed straight through them, and it did not look like it had much height on it at first. So had we had the wall positioned in that spot, it may have made a difference, but you can't really blame anybody for that. It was just an otherworldly goal. So I don't blame our defense at all on that second one. It just so happened that I think Ezra Armstrong fouled the guy just outside the box 4 minutes after he came in. And I mean, you can't do anything about that kind of shot. But I do want to call out too, and then I'll stop talking. Doling's first goal, which came at the beginning of the match, 18 minutes in, and really set the stage for everything. That to me was so I talked earlier about how Doling's first goal in the Real Monarchs game was what I was expecting of him based on how he plays. This was that to the nth degree to me, where there's a throw in from Ben DeRosa on the sideline over by the bench nearest the goal. He threw it in, it hit Doling, Doling had a chest pass to Juan Kuzain right next to him outright. Juan Kuzain had a short pass quickly back to Doling. Doling got it to Celio in the middle, just outside the box. Celio laid it off for an incoming Akil Watts, who's coming from the left side. Watts passed it out far left to a sprinting Kwame, who then gave it across. And while all of this is happening, Josh Doling, from that initial pass that he made, is kind of skirting in behind everybody and made some kind of crazy run through the center to receive that cross from Kwame, and he headed it in between two defenders. So that kind of mentality, that kind of awareness, and for him to be able to see what was happening outside the ball away from him and position himself perfectly after facilitating the pass, that to me is exactly what I expect from what we've seen from Josh Doling, and I absolutely love it.
I love it too. That was amazing to see. It started with him and finished with him. That was great to see. So I'm glad you also caught that, Matt, because I was watching the replay. I was like, oh, this is a beauty of a goal. Great teamwork, and he started with that chest pass after the throwing, and then he basically went from one side to the other and finished that chance. So that was great to see.
Yeah, to kick it back to the stats, I think I find it very interesting that we've had very little of the ball in every game except these last two, and I think that's something to, like, thinking about that whole conversation about how good our players are and what do they like compared to the rest of the league. Whether it's true or not, I think we're kind of viewed as, I have two ideas. One is that we're viewed as one of the better teams in the league, and so, like, be prepared when you go up against City. And I do think that's true to some degree, though I'm biased. The other idea is, well, we've seen them win without the ball. To go from such low possession to us having to control the game the last two times, I find that to be purposeful. You know what I mean? I think these other teams are coming in and they're like, just give St. Louis the ball and let's see what they can do with it. I think that's what we used to say about Pittsburgh Riverhounds, with, like, Bob Lilly had the best defensive teams in the whole USL. And so then teams just started giving him the ball, and he then became one of the better attacking teams because he's a good coach. He was able to figure it out. So anyway, I was just kind of thinking about all those things. I was so surprised to see the possession level being so high. And I do think it's purposeful. I think teams are trying to beat us by giving us the ball to some degree. But I will say that I think the boys performed admirably in that regard. And I think it's going to take some growing pains. Like, this game was definitely a growing pain. But, like I said, I only watched the beginning of this game and I was like, okay, this looks like a Real Monarchs game to me. We've already gotten some shots on goal in the first, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It was looking really good. Dolan got an early goal. And if we controlled the ball from then on, like, I would have thought we'd win the game. You know what I mean? But we've seen that in this case, they were able to kind of pull it out. And was it an outlier? I think possibly this was an outlier, but I do think we should watch those possession stats and see how we perform in games going forward.
Well, and the level of our competition too plays into that, because I didn't think too much of it in the Monarchs game, because if you look at their space in the standings, we should have dominated that game. And so I saw it as more, okay, so they're unable to possess the ball. Even if we're pressing high, we're doing that continuously. We're dominating the passing. Their passing rate, success rate was only at 57%. Ours was 78 in the Monarchs game. So we dominated every aspect of that game.
Wow.
Vancouver, completely different story. They're right there neck and neck. Now they're ahead of us in the standings, but just by 3 points, I believe. So they're a good team. And so that was a nice benchmark, just like the Minnesota game was, where it was a lot closer overall. If you look at the cumulative stats, we still had a better passing percentage, although it was a lot closer, 63 to 70%. So I think we're disrupting appropriately.
Yeah.
And even on these good teams, we're preventing them from really stringing together passes and possessing the ball and creating plays, maybe out of the back, or because, like I said earlier, they had to send the ball to get their first goal. They had to score from a free kick to get their second. So they didn't ever create a chance out of the back or any kind of fancy playmaking.
Absolutely.
And I think that speaks to our ability to just make them uncomfortable, that swarming aspect that Lutz has been reinforcing on just about every interview he gives. And it's nice to actually see that working when you see it with your eyes and when you look at the stats, kind of supporting that our team is able to disrupt the opposing team that much.
Yeah, and St. Louis, as you guys already said, St. Louis, it looked like it was cruising and it was going to be an easy game. It's just that the chances didn't go in, and Coach Hackworth said at the end of the game, he was like, "You cannot let a good team like Vancouver stay in the game for so long, because eventually that will come back." It's just that the team couldn't put away those chances. He said, "Well, yeah, our level dropped off in the last 20 minutes, and that's something we're gonna look into. But it is a game that we should have won. But I think it's one of those games, especially for a development team, you will learn from those games. So it's a good loss. Yeah, like it's sad that the team dominated and couldn't get it, and Vancouver could be one of those teams that we could be fighting with them for a spot in the playoffs. But I think the team will learn from this. And one thing I wanted to mention, when St. Louis was cruising, I usually when I'm watching the game and like take notes, see what questions I could ask. So maybe you can blame this on me. Like I was writing stuff and I was like, oh, I should. It was like a second half. It was still 1-0, and I was like, oh, it looks like CD2 is going to win. We're gonna get a clean sheet. So I wanted to ask about having back-to-back clean sheets and wins after that Minnesota game. Then Vancouver scored. I was like, okay, so it scratched the clean sheet, but we may still get a win. And then Vancouver scores the second one. I was like, okay, I guess I jinxed it. So sorry.
It's like talking about a no-hitter, right?
Yeah.
Santiago, you were really awesome about pointing out that Simon Becher was in this game on the Vancouver side. And so he played 90 minutes. He had an XG of 0.43, which is pretty good, actually. 3 shots, 1 on target in this game. So Simon's doing pretty good. I think he's started pretty much every game for Vancouver, too, so far. And, of course, we're rooting for him, even if he did just beat us.
Yes. Simon also had a moment in the second half where he went down and he really milked the clock for a few seconds.
Jerk.
So no, he's a shit star. He knows how to, especially in Herman.
He's familiar with the field, right?
Right.
Yeah.
As if AJ Polizzolo wouldn't do the same thing in that position.
Yeah, but Simon worked it to an art form when he was at Flair. So yeah.
Very nice. Good talking, guys. I love hearing what you guys have to say about all this stuff. We're going to move away from the games now, and we're going to talk about the stadium. Seats have been going in, and gosh, they look so good. Jake, I want to start with you on this one. We can read the word city in the seats now. What a world.
Yeah, well, I mean, we saw that in the renderings, but I didn't imagine like how amazing it was going to look when Matt, you posted that photo. Was it from STL Above or STL Aerials?
STL Aerials,
yeah. Man, that looks so freaking cool that you can just read city right in front of the skyline, and man, yeah, I don't know. It's, I mean, like I said, you see the renderings, but I just still didn't imagine how cool this was going to be. I think I just couldn't fathom it. And seeing those seats in there, it's all I can say is it's so cool, because that's what it is. It's freaking amazing. And we're so close to like when everything is going to be done, when the stadium is going to be done. It's incredible. It's really exciting.
Any other thoughts, anyone?
Well, the seats have only been going up for a couple weeks now, and we're already almost finished with the lower bowl. So it can't be too much longer. And they're already on their way to the upper deck. So I think we're right around the corner. By the time we have our next episode, they might be done with installing all the seats. And if you listened to the City Voice episode with Josh McPherson, right, director of groundskeeping,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he actually said that by the end of May, I think it was, we may start to see sod and get the grass going. So I think we're right around the corner to see a vastly different overall stadium, and it's
Did
super
I
exciting because everybody had the one comment I saw was like, "What's the deal with like the few red seats around here?" And it was not. I think a lot of people didn't remember or didn't realize that they start with the city red or the pink seats at the top, and then it kind of pixelates down to the river blue seats, and all we're seeing right now are river blue with just the pixel city red seats. But man, that city lettering just pops.
I love it.
Me
I love
too.
it. Just seeing the city, and then the arch behind it. It's great. I love it.
It's absolutely fantastic, and I hope we never see it during a game.
Well, I was about
Well
to say
said.
it should be required that you have to wear white shirts on the letters because I want to see people, and I still want it to say city from the
That'd be
skyline.
awesome.
I love it. Only, no. Only white people there too. Does that help? I'm not-
Ooh.
Terrible.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
no, it's too far.
I don't mean
No.
it. I don't mean it.
No.
I saw the gears turn and it was like, should I say it? Should I not?
I know.
Oh, come on.
I don't mean it. Yeah, but Santiago, I'm not gonna let you sit in those seats.
Yeah, but guys, I think back to the ticket gate conversation we had a few weeks ago. I will think all the seats will be installed by next week because the first
wow.
people that will get their tours, I believe,
Oh,
is
that's right.
May 18th.
18th.
So-
You're right.
So I think it will be done or close to be done by next week.
That's cool.
You know, the funny thing is, and I don't know if they're still doing this or if they're just not worrying about it because it's all GA, but far as I know, the supporter section is going to have seating. Now it's all going to be, it's general admission. So it's not, you don't pick out your seat, and the seats are all going to be locked up during the match. So it probably doesn't matter. But I just noticed that they're waiting. That's still the plan as far as I know, is to lock the
Right.
seats and install them, but they're waiting. And so they're clearly not prioritizing that. To your point, Santiago, that they want to make sure that everybody who is wanting to have the opportunity to pick out their seats, all of those seats are installed by probably the 18th.
Mhm.
Smart. Did I see that someone said that it's on track to be done in July as planned?
July 22nd. Yeah.
July 22nd.
Okay. I wasn't
said
sure if
it's-
I read that correctly.
They said it's 80% complete now.
That's amazing. Yeah. Good job. I mean, I didn't expect it to be done in July. So,
Well, the first event that they announced for the stadium is the Biz Dash, that 5K that they have St. Louis Sports Commission runs. So that's actually taking place at Centene Stadium on September 22nd, I think it is.
wow.
Yeah, and Matt already signed up, right?
I signed up for races, and I've never ran that one, and I made sure to sign up for that one because it was the first. And they have the swag is like it's not a city gear, but it's like city inspired scarf and shirt. So
Oh, cool.
absolutely signed up for that one day one.
Heck
to go
yeah.
hang out on the East Plaza and race around the stadium.
They're giving out all kinds of swag. Santiago, didn't you get some free city stuff this week for some reason?
Oh yeah, but that was because my office finally reopened after 2 years.
Oh, your office. That makes sense.
The new building downtown, so they had some St. Louis related swag bucket. It came in a bucket. It had a St. Louis City scarf, a Blues hat, some Cardinals stuff. So it was cool. It was cool to see all the St. Louis teams in that swag bag.
Love it. Love it. So yeah, I want to talk about this. And my segue will be this, that on the City Voice, this interview with Lutz was just awesome. I really enjoyed it. Is it Peter Wood has been doing them, and he asks good questions. He handles it very nicely. And I like that they clearly don't pre-plan questions and answers. That makes me really happy because there were a few questions that he asked that he wasn't sure what he was going to get. And I love that because when clubs run podcasts, it's often terrible. And like, this is actually, they're doing as good a job as I think you could hope for. Yeah.
Well, you know that Peter Wood is no stranger to the podcasting world and to interviews and covering sporting events, right?
No, I didn't. I have actually not looked up what he's done. Sorry.
He is a longtime Arsenal fan who has done podcasts and work for them, not for the club, but like fan sites and things like that. So he has some experience in that aside from his now day job as the content guy.
Okay, yeah, makes a lot of sense. I didn't know about his background, but he sounds so natural. He's so good.
He's good.
Yeah,
He's good.
But
That's Zach Lowry's background too, right? With Arsenal, that's where he started.
Yeah, I believe so.
But one thing, Santiago, you were mentioning all the teams together in one package, and one of the questions he asked was, Lutz, do you like to go to St. Louis games? And his fandom for all sports was nice, but also like he really likes the Blues. I really enjoyed listening to him talk about how much he wants the Blues to do well this year, and enjoying going to Cardinals games and him catching a basketball game in Salt Lake. I love that. I love that he knew like the Calgary goalkeeper for hockey, and they would like kind of compare notes on how to train and stuff like that. I thought it was great. But I think we should all kind of talk about some of our favorite moments in the City Voice. Matt, I know you're primed and ready, so why don't you start us off?
So
There's so much, yeah.
I was listening to it and I was like, oh man, this is going to be prime to discuss. Like we have to analyze this entire thing. And so 5 minutes into it, I was like, oh, I got to take a step back. I'm transcribing what's going on here.
I know.
Like I've never gonna, but so they went in kind of sequential order of the Academy, City 2, some MLS signings, and then got into Bradley Carnell and some of the fan questions. So the one thing that really jumped out at me about the Academy is I think they announced for the first time that there's a different structure for the Academy than they had previously announced. So they used to have all these slides and announcements that the Academy is going to go U14 through U17. And Lutz, I believe for the first time, announced that the U14s are not a thing anymore in the Academy. So they're only going to run U15s through U17s. And he said that they've done their open trials, they've done scouting, they have kids signed, and they're going to stand up the team this summer. And then once they do, he was very specific that the full amount of teams or the whole Academy setup will be completed. They'll have the full amount of teams, and that's very, very promising. So that was breaking news to me. The fact that he mentioned that they're still working out with clubs how they're going to approach the U14 level. And by clubs, I took Gallagher, Fuse, like all those other groups in the area that will essentially funnel players up and how they can work to develop those. And he almost kind of parlayed that into the City Futures program that Sasha's running and that they have with the younger kids that are more or less treating that as like an ID session, because he also commented that they're using that to kind of supplement identifying kids who are in high school and club teams. And so another means of identification, because we've always wondered, like, how are they going to actually go into the community and find kids who aren't already a part of a team? And this is how the City Futures,
that's how they do it. Yeah.
That's how they're going to do it. And that's super promising that they already have that in place and that they're standing that up. But I think that's going to play a factor into the U14s as well. So that to me was the biggest Academy news that they had. There was a lot of conversations around the middle of May. The 16s and 17s are going to Maryland for another flex MLS Next tournament. They're talked about the relationships with like JB Marine, Gallagher, and Fuse, but the fact that they're not having a U14s in their academy and 15s through 17s is their full academy system. That was the most interesting thing to me about the academy.
Yeah. Almost like it makes you wonder. I mean, who knows what happened, but it makes you wonder if they kind of handed that to them as like almost like hey, surely they're upset about losing some of their players. So, like maybe they're letting them take it to that point as like a gesture of good faith. We trust your training, and why shouldn't they? In fact, that's maybe the one thing I want to say about this City Voice is almost like he went so far to say like how good everything's been going. And the only thing missing was like, when he was going off on how great the St. Louis people are, I think a lot of credit also goes to all the coaching and all the programs that have come out of St. Louis, Scott Gallagher and JB Marine and Lou Fuse, just and that speaks to what St. Louis wants to and all the other things he mentioned. But, just to kind of take it one step further, that, you know, we've got a good club system going here already in St. Louis, and perhaps taking away that U14 is part of their acknowledgement of that, and maybe them not wanting to infringe on what's already here as well. I don't know what you guys think about that, but that was one of the things I got out of it. Open table, there was so much to talk about with this City Voice podcast with Lutz. A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, he touched on so many points. We could probably go another hour talking about some of the stuff he
Podcast
talked
about a
about.
podcast.
Yeah,
Who
but
doesn't love a pod?
a couple of things that caught my attention. Peter asked him. No, not Peter. Came from the fans. Somebody actually, it was your question, Matt, about how the new signings were going to combine with the current team when they come, and obviously, like all of us, or at least me and other people I have talked to, were thinking, okay, they are gonna come in July and start playing right away. And he mentioned, well, they're gonna come from off season, so basically they have to do like preseason. They'll be training, but by the time they are ready, there are only gonna be a few games left. So he said, yeah, they're gonna get some minutes, but it's not like they're gonna take minutes away from the players that are currently on the City 2 roster. So that was interesting to me. And the other thing that was interesting is that, again, he has mentioned this on several interviews, and I think he keeps mentioning because he knows some people will be disappointed once the final roster is announced. Like, doesn't look like there's gonna be like a big well-known world star playing for City SC. It's all about the system. They are looking for player for the system. And the other thing is that it sounded, he didn't say like an age, but he said, yeah, we're not looking for players in that older bracket that are towards the end of their career. So that also caught my attention.
He got passionate about it. I love the moment. I tweeted this today where he was like, we don't want a retirement player. We don't want a player that's going to give 6 or 8%.
Right.
He's going to run 6 or 8 sprints in an entire game to try to score a goal and then give up the rest of the game. He's like, a player like this is a handbrake to us. I love that phrase. It was so good. He called a player a handbrake, and I took a few liberties in my tweet. I won't repeat now, but like, we can all picture that kind of player in MLS, you know, like had no interest in working hard for that team, just wanted a paycheck to kind of live out the rest of his career in the United States. It's
How many
going
times
away.
have we seen that? Yeah.
A lot. Hopefully it's leaving, you know, but you know,
and never come to St. Louis.
Match that mold. Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
So one of the things Santiago mentioned, the MLS players coming in, I found that super interesting because it almost forces us to reframe what we have now come to think as what will happen in July. Because early on, when we started signing these players, knowing that they're going to be not having a place to play, or are we going to loan them out this fall? And then it eventually progressed to, no, they're going to play for City 2. And us assuming that as soon as they are eligible and they can register and sign, they're going to play in July. And this kind of level set that for us. And I think we as fans need to understand that July 4th or 7th, whenever that transfer window opens, that's when they can officially be on City's roster or train or participate in team activities. But Santiago mentioned, Lutz said they're going to come off of a vacation holiday. They're going to have time off. They're going to have to go through a second preseason, have training with the team. So that 10 games or so that they have left, where they may come in as 60-minute subs, or they may play 60 minutes or maybe 90 here and there, but they're not going to, it's not going to like Klaus is going to completely supplant Doling up front from the moment he arrives. And so that to me kind of gave a little a breath of a nice exhale to the fact that guys that we were worried about, like Doling or Diaz, might lose minutes when it comes to these other guys who are coming in and play those same positions.
I agree. I felt that really well.
What better welcome to America than to come to fair St. Louis right off the bat? They better get him here like July 1st for that weekend.
If I don't see
Here it
if I don't
is.
see if I don't see Klaus, Ostrak, Berkey, Pedro, and Nilsson walking around the fairgrounds there at Forest Park, I'm gonna be so upset.
I do bet that most of those guys will be in St. Louis by July 1st.
Yeah, I think they will.
Yeah.
I want to see them
But
just walking around as a big group, like led by
disservice
Lutz,
to
Hack,
their-
and Vin.
A disservice to their new life in America if they don't. Like
Yeah.
right off the plane, right downtown.
If they don't enjoy the 120-degree heat index
Yeah, exactly.
of Fair St. Louis.
Oh, wait, is Fair St. Louis at the Arch this
Busch
year?
Lights.
I think it's back at the Arch.
It's back
Yeah,
at
I
the Arch.
think,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think so.
Should be.
Oh,
Hand him
yeah.
a Budweiser and
Yeah,
shoot
like
off some fireworks.
what do we like a funnel cake? I think they would need to try a funnel cake. And yeah, just be like unbelievably sweaty from all the humidity. It won't even be that hot. They're just gonna sweat like crazy from the humidity. Like, welcome to Missouri, boys. That's great.
Get
Well
used
done,
to
Jake.
it.
You made a mistake.
Yeah, what have you done? You signed already, pal. You're stuck. Stuart, any thoughts on what we've talked about? We should probably wrap it up. As usual, we've skipped our last highlight for the day.
Well, I missed the One Voice podcast, but listening to you guys talk about how Lutz was talking about how they wouldn't take up minutes immediately, my first thought is you want to get them in July 1st regardless. Primarily, main reason why get that green card clock going for next year.
Yep.
So get them in the second you can. Training and playing time is secondary at that moment, but
It'll come.
you just get that clock going and they'll move their way into the team. And I do think against the Rapids too on July 2nd, we'll see at least a couple of the guys play or sub on, but maybe not start. The guy like Berkey, who hasn't been playing for a while, maybe he doesn't start right away. But I don't know if he comes over next week, maybe he trains with the team for 6 weeks and he wants to start. Maybe Creek needs a break and you start Berkey right off the bat on July 2nd. I don't know, but there's so many things going on with the team right now. So, it's great that we have games to talk about. And as much fun as this Anheuser-Busch announcement's going to be, it's really secondary to the stadium, to the team, to players actually happening. And it's not encompassing all of our world.
I agree. This is great. I love that we have games.
There's two other things that I wanted to say about City 2 that he talked about. One of them is just this kind of story kind of embodies a lot of what he said about Bradley Carnell and the purpose of City 2. But I thought it was really interesting that Luce mentioned he was traveling so much with the team, going to the different locations like Colorado, Salt Lake, over to the West Coast. And the thing that caught my attention is how he said that they're using all of these trips this year as data points for next year, where they have an opportunity to kind of, he called out seeing what it's like to get from the airport to the hotel or from the hotel to the stadium to the training grounds. How long does it take? What's the travel like? What's the altitude like in each one of those locations? How do our players, and when they went to Salt Lake, it was a perfect opportunity to see how their players react in those circumstances so that they could take that data to their kind of back office planning. And when they have to go to Real Salt Lake or Seattle or Portland, they now know what it's going to be like for their players and they can plan better, as opposed to going out there brand new for the first time, traveling across the country into the unknown, hearing about what they may need to do and what it might be like, but not actually having been there or know. So I feel like it's almost a dress rehearsal in a sense for not just the players, but the staff and the coaches. And having Bradley Carnell and having Lutz and Hackworth, the three kind of like the triumvirate who are going to be in charge of City next year, be a part of all of that, gives us such a unique opportunity to not enter the league next year like a true fresh expansion team. And so he mentioned a lot about learning things this year. And the last point that I have is he did mention Peter asked him, will City 2 players now be in the MLS lineup next year? And we touched on this a little earlier, and I wanted to save it for the end because it had me thinking a little differently about why we're not seeing academy players yet. And I know it's only 2 months in, so this is probably a little early to be thinking about this. But then again, we're probably a quarter of the way through the season or something like that. So if the theory is, and the mindset is that the City 2 players, and the purpose of this entire team is development to be able to take that next leap into the MLS level, then the players that we're seeing now and that we're going to continue to see more and more of are those players who are probably going to find themselves playing for City next year. And it may seem obvious when you say it and when you think about it, like Doling is starting just about every game. Kuzain, Yarrow, Celio, AJ, these guys are starting every single game. And so it's like you think, all right, they trust these players a lot to play the game, but that's not really what it is. It's not you trust the player to win. It's you want to see the most out of this player to develop and see as much of them as possible for this season because you are intending to sign them for the City team next year. And so all of these players that we're seeing so much of in these lineups, it gives me more and more, especially after hearing this, more and more confidence that these are the players who may find themselves on the City team next year. So we may be seeing Josh Doling, who, if you listen to what he was saying about Klaus, everything he was saying about Klaus, and you look back at what Doling's been doing this year, that's it. He's doing exactly what Lutz was describing Klaus is going to do next year. So you see these mirrors of what they're saying for some of these MLS internationals. You see them get all this playing time when Lutz is very directly saying that this year is all about developing them for next year. You can't help but draw these kind of conclusions that it is about some of these academy kids and growing. And you have your Aaron Herds, who we are pretty sure are going to find themselves on the City team next year. But it's more interesting. It's also interesting to see these City 2 players that we thought may just be placeholders are in fact proving themselves and gaining the trust in the system, because it's all about the system, so that we're going to be finding them on the City MLS roster next year.
Hope so. We're rooting for these guys. We're already falling in love with them. So I would love to see a bunch of them over there. Other thing about what you said about learning about travel, which is a big deal, as you heard in that interview. We're going to be the easternmost city in the Western Conference of MLS next year. And so it is more vital than people think about. It's the worst part about about professional soccer in the world is the U.S. travel. As far as travel is concerned, the U.S. is the worst, just about. I think Russia's got a couple cities that are hard to get to, but we're by far the worst. And there's complaints every other year about, how many charter flights they're allowed to use as far as how much money they spend and stuff. So it's a big deal, and we're going to be hearing about that in the future. So something to think about there. Thank you guys. So lucky to have you four to talk to every other week, basically, is what we've been doing. And like Stuart said, we've had games to talk about and other fun stuff to talk about, and it's just getting better and better throughout the year. So we'll be hitting everybody back up in a couple more weeks. We're going to change our recording day, but it shouldn't affect much. So hang with us. Thank you if you logged in with us tonight live, and thank you for downloading if you're listening on the podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.